So there are multiple reasons why I will never buy a ported sub again. And we're going to talk about all of them. The first one we're going to talk about is the vibration test. I have a glass of water here. All of my subs in this room are sealed. They have two drivers in them, one on one side, one on the other, and they face the opposite direction. So they are force canceling subs. So they move in the same direction and they cancel out any vibrations that go on inside the speaker enclosure. So I have a glass of water here that I'm going to put on top of one of my sealed subs. And I'm going to play a 25 hertz tone. And I'm going to turn it up pretty decently loud. And I'm going to show you that the sub does not vibrate whatsoever. And just to make this easier for you guys, I have my decibel meter. You're not going to be able to hear this very well. So I'm going to grab my decibel meter and my phone and I will record the volume levels that we're reaching so that you guys can see that the glass of water does not move. So let me turn on my camera. I'm recording. Let me start the tone. And we're going to turn it up to, here we go, negative 12 dB. We're about 100 dBs of bass right now, at least right here, this part of the room. Let's check the glass of water. Nothing. Nothing at all. To make this even better, let me find a 20 hertz test tone. Let's do 20 hertz, just cause. (20 hertz), 102 dBs. Nothing. So I love the fact that my subs don't vibrate. A lot of people who have ported subs end up buying isolation feet or isoacoustics to keep from vibrating the floor or keep from having bass energy run throughout the walls, rattle the pictures, things like that. You don't need this with sealed subs, especially dual opposed subs, meaning two drivers facing opposite directions. They cancel out the force between them two so they do not move. I can put that same glass of water on every sub and it will not shake. Yes, I feel the bass shaking the floor in my room because my floors are wooden, but the subs themselves aren't vibrating on the floor, giving me a cleaner, more accurate sound because it's not mixing in with the vibrations of the room that you're naturally going to have. So that's an understated reason as to why you should go sealed subs or dual opposed sealed subs, whatever. I love it. The next reason why I don't think that I'm ever going to go for ported again is the sound of a sealed sub. Sealed subs they have a bad rap when it comes to movies. Oh, you want ported for movies, you want sealed for music. It can't be further from the truth. Sealed subs are musical subs because they tend to sound tighter, they roll off slower, and you can put gobs of power to them. These are some huge sealed, they're bigger than a lot of ported subs, but that's because I have two drivers in one enclosure. But because they're sealed, they give me a really tight sound and it's a really flat frequency. If you've never seen my channel, I talk all the time about my subs frequency response, and I have a really flat response all the way from 5 hertz to 120 hertz, where I usually cut them off for movies, the LFE. So they are completely smooth, and I don't think that I would be able to do that with a ported sub in this room. We'll talk about the room in another point, but they have a really nice, smooth, buttery response, and you can get that with a ported sub, but it's easier to do with a sealed sub by nature. So the sound of a sealed sub is what I go after, and because sealed subs are so good for music, they really give punchy, articulate, fast, transient bass for movies too. A good musical sub is a really good movie sub. especially if it can play loud and low like mine can. So that's 2 reasons so far why I'll never go to a ported sub. So this reason is a big reason why I won't go ported subs. And of course, this doesn't apply to all subwoofers, but port noise. All ported subs have a port. 1 port, 3 ports, 2 ports, 7 ports, slot port, vented port. They all have some sort of port. And depending on the sub's tuning frequency, you can really hear a lot of air. So let's say you have a sub with 3 ports in the front and they're tuned to 18 hertz. Well, once you start getting closer to that port tuning, you start to get a lot of turbulence. The closer you get to the port's tuning, the more air that comes out of the port. And sometimes, depending on design or price tag or quality of sub, you may hear that air leaving the port. And it could distract you. It could sound terrible. It could sound like distortion to you. It could be louder than the frequency itself. You don't have port noises on sealed subs because they're sealed. So it just adds to the overall bass response of the sub being, a little bit tighter. You can play really low with no issues. You don't have any other noise outside of what the sub is trying to play. Some ported subs are notorious for having a lot of port chuffing, as they call it, at higher volumes, especially those infrasonics, 20 hertz on lower. That's when you start hearing more air than anything. So I like sealed subs because they're quieter when it comes to air because you can't hear the air. Now to piggyback on the whole port thing, all ported subs have some sort of tuning frequency. Obviously, the lower you tune your port, the lower it'll play. And when you get around the port tuning, it's usually at its loudest, the most efficient. But they have a quick roll off. So let's say you have a sub that's tuned to 19 hertz. Once you get under port tuning, you now drop off a cliff when it comes to its frequency response. So instead of your frequencies slightly gradually rolling off as it gets lower, it starts to go like this really quickly. So the fall off on a ported sub is much more quick. It's not as gradual as a sealed sub. A sealed sub rolls off very slowly, not very slowly, but it tapers off a lot slower than a ported sub does. So what that means to you is, let's say your sub's really good at 20 hertz, but now it's 17 hertz, 16 hertz, and now we're quickly losing volume level. Now you don't hear anything at all. 20 hertz is great, 16 hertz is barely even heard or felt. So I like sealed subs because of the roll off. They gradually decline in frequency, in volume as the frequencies drop. So again, you get a more linear response, and I like that about sealed subs. Also, to piggyback on all those points, whenever you start to fall below port tuning, the drivers start to lose control. What I mean by that is because ports have a tune, again, let's say 19 hertz, if you start playing 17 hertz, 16 hertz, 15 hertz, the sub starts to unload, meaning the driver and the amplifier no longer have control of each other. The box doesn't have any influence of your sub once you get underneath its port tuning. So that's how you cause damage. If you're playing really low frequencies at really loud volumes underneath your sub's port tuning, then you may cause damage to your sub itself. It may start to unload, meaning it's starting to just flap everywhere, and that can be very dangerous. And a lot of these manufacturers don't tell you what their port tuning is. I do know how to figure it out, but you may not. And so if you don't know what your port tuning is and you start pumping low bass that it can't play, all you're doing is causing potential harm to your sub, or maybe a lot of heat, and it could damage it. You don't really have that problem with sealed subs because there's no port, so there's no port tuning. You can still damage your sub by playing too low, but the risk of it is higher on a ported sub than it is on a sealed. And again, that's why I like sealed subs. All right, I have 2 more reasons for you. The room is a huge reason why I like sealed subs. Ported subs are tough to get right when it comes to a small room like mine. I think if all my subs were ported instead of sealed, I would have a much harder time getting as good of a response as I've gotten in this room. So because of that, I went with sealed subs, not only for all the other points that I mentioned, but because they play nicer in any room, really. Ported subs are great for high volumes. Ported subs play louder than the sealed equivalent. So an SB17 doesn't play as loud as a PB17 because of the ports, but the SB will sound smoother, tighter, and play lower than, say, the ported sub because it's not ported. And inside the room, how ports and sound waves react in a room versus a sealed sub is a little bit different. So it's easier for me to tune and calibrate and bass manage and blend with sealed subs than it is with ported subs, even if they're all the same. So they kind of interact with your room a little bit differently. So I like sealed subs for maybe the ease of use, I guess you could say. And then the last one is power. I can throw tons of power on my sealed subs. If you guys aren't familiar with my channel, this sub here is the only sub in my room that I bought from a store, an online retailer, a factory. All my other subs are DIY, with this being the inspiration behind it. So I can throw power to my DIY subs. I have 3,200 watts on my subs, 3,200 watts on my subs, and I don't worry about them because they can handle that power. Yes, it's broken off into two because there's two drivers, so each sub is seeing like 1,300 to 1,600 watts at a time. But I wouldn't want to put a lot of power to the ported sub because, again, you get underneath port tuning, you can cause yourself some harm. But you can make a large sealed box like this and throw tons of power at it and it won't break a sweat. And so I really like that. So the power capabilities, the power handling on a sealed sub seems to be a little bit better. And you're going to need it because typically sealed subs are in a smaller box, so you need a little more power. But I personally like sealed subs for all of those reasons. So I don't know that I'll ever go back to a ported sub, at least not in this house. How about that? I won't go back to one in this home unless I get a huge basement that's 800 square feet. Then maybe I'll look into some ported subs if I feel like I need it, but not anytime soon. So leave me your preference down below. This isn't really a ported versus sealed. It's more like a, what is your preference based off of how loud you like to listen? What do you like to listen to? How often do you listen? How big is your space? It's more about what works for you more than it is which one's better or worse. So let me know down below, what's your preference on ported versus sealed subs? Which one do you use? If you use both in the same room, you're nuts. But if you do, let me know that too. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already, and we will see you guys in the next video. Keep it, guy out. Peace.